You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome to McGuire Mondays here on the Toronto Sports Rush channel, brought to you by the Bet Rivers Network. My name is Kyle Andrew, and I am, of course, joined today by Pierre McGuire. But before we begin, we would just like to remind everyone, one of the ways in which we're able to bring you all this premium content is to, in fact, have you like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe. Please leave us comments, and without any other begging, Pierre, how you doing this Monday morning?
Fantastic, Kyle. Really nice to visit with you.
Absolutely it is. And I want to begin right off the hop here today to going back to the playoffs and evaluating how the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup. And I believe, and we've talked about this a lot together, it's a depth issue, and specifically that third line. And the Leafs have used the offseason to kind of copycat that, didn't they?
And they were smart to do it. You know, that third line you're talking about with Lundell, Marchand, and Luostarinen was a phenomenal force for them. And let's not even just talk about the third line. Let's talk about the fourth line, too. And that fourth line actually changed after Game 2 of the Florida Panther-Toronto Maple Leaf series. Florida's down 2-0. Paul Maurice says, we need more physicality in the lineup. He goes to A.J. Greer. He goes to Tomas Nosek. He goes to Jonah Gadjevich. And he says, you guys create mayhem. I'm going to get you on the ice anywhere from 7 to 12 minutes of the game, the fourth line we're talking about. And this is why the great Scotty Bowman always used to say to me all the time, Kyle, never number your lines, because one night your first line could be your fourth and your fourth can be your first. And so I've always lived by that adage. But I will say this, in all due respect to everybody else in the league, the best third line, and I will number my lines now, in the National Hockey League, Luostarinen, Lundell, and Marchand. Without a doubt, this playoff season, they impacted the game more than any other third line in the National Hockey League this playoff season.
That's all great points, Pierre. And it just really seems like that forever, the fan base, the media, and, you know, until recently, the upper management with this Toronto Maple Leafs team, core for this, core for that. But we now live in an NHL very focused on bottom six.
For sure. And I think where it got away, and I know the analytics community will be mad with me, it kind of got, I know, I'm not worried about it, trust me. It kind of got away from managers and scouts when the eye test became less of a thing and numbers became more of a thing, because depth players usually aren't analytic darlings. They're not guys that possess the puck for long periods of time. They're not guys that generate a lot of shots against the opposition. They finish checks. They control tempo in their own zone. They create energy. They help sustain momentum in games. You don't get big analytic grades for that. And I think now managers, especially GMs like Bill Zito down in Florida and other managers around the league, are realizing if we're going to be able to compete with Florida, we got to start adding those players.
Yeah, and let's focus on specifically 3 offseason acquisitions for the Leafs here are likely to appear in the bottom 6. And those are, of course, the most recent Dakota Joshua, Nicholas Roy, and Matthias Michelli. Dakota Joshua is a very, very interesting acquisition. The most recent, it seems like they stole him, but specifically, he was a Toronto Maple Leafs. They gave him away for nothing. But even better than that, he has a history with Berube, and Berube likes him.
Well, he does, because he knows he brings physicality. He's a player. It's a lot like when Colton Orr played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a lot like when Cody McLeod was playing in the National Hockey League. Guys like that, the coaches like them, and I can speak to it. I had a player like that, Mark Janssens. You knew every single game exactly what you were going to get. You weren't getting an A, you weren't getting a D. You were getting a solid B, because they could check, they could block shots, they fight if they have to, they could kill penalties. They did all those things. Dakota Joshua can do some of that. He was a very good player at Ohio State. I watched him play at Ohio State. Then Toronto let him go. He goes to St. Louis, does all right there, goes up to Vancouver, does very well there. And now obviously you see where he is. He's in Toronto. But I'm excited by some of the moves they've made. I like the physicality aspect to Toronto's lineup. I know a lot of people say, look at these players that we've added, and we could have signed Mitch Marner for the same amount of money as those guys that we signed. I'm not buying into that. I'm going with, they needed depth, they needed character, they needed jam. They got all that.
Yeah, it just seems like they've, you know, the talk is all, oh, how do we replace what Marner did? It's like, well, you don't. You do something different, because the formula they had with Marner, and it's not a knock on him. His style of play will find a home in Vegas. But they needed to do something different to get past Florida, and they're building it out. And I think it's tough to lose 102 points, but they're going to get redistributed. And I think the new roster is better. I think they're deeper, and I think there's a lot to be excited about in Toronto.
Kyle, I love what you said about Michelli, because nobody's talking about him enough. Go watch some of his highlight tapes from what he did in Arizona in particular. Watch the peripheral vision that he has. Watch the playmaking ability he has coming down the wing, both on the right side and the left side. Watch he can manufacture offense off the cycle, which is predominantly an important part, especially in the Eastern Conference, of how you have to create offense because everything's so congested in the neutral zone. So I think that he could be, just like we talked about last year, just a little bit later than this time of the year, how Anthony Stolarz was a steal for the Toronto Maple. I think Michelli, this time next year when you and I are talking, we're going to say, oh my gosh, how did Brad Treliving get Matthias Michelli? And I think he's going to have a massive impact. Is he going to get 102? No, he's not getting 100 points. But let's say he gets 55, which he can do. Let's say he gets, let's just say he gets to 60. That's found money. That's found money.
And it's not even just the found money. You're not saying something unreasonable. He is stepping into a potent roster. Yeah. He is stepping into the best hockey team he's ever played for. All three guys I brought up in this conversation are stepping into a great situation to see the peak of their games develop here in Toronto, and Toronto got them for a song.
Well said. Completely agree. And again, I know they're doom and gloomer. I get it. I totally get it. I understand. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'll never knock anybody's opinion. True. My opinion is Toronto needed to, and the general manager, Brad Treliving, said it best. You and I talked about it. We need to change the DNA of this team. They've started to. Now, is it finished? I don't think it is. Kyle, I really don't believe it is. I think they need to add a puck-moving defenseman, and if they could ever somehow find another top six forward, they changed the real DNA of this team significantly.
Yeah, it looks more like we may see the puck-moving defenseman in the offseason, but another top six forward, that could be a trade made throughout next season. But they're reshaping their roster and the financial structure of the team to even allow them to do that. Now, they have ways to go with that because they still have these big contracts with no move clauses, but they are slowly shifting away from that dynamic and really giving themselves a flexible roster. But I want to talk about one of those big contracts next, specifically Austin Matthews. The core four, far in the rearview mirror now. That's no longer the case in Toronto. He had a big adjustment year last year, taking over the captaincy and, let's be honest, dealing with injuries all season long and the pressure that comes in Toronto. Now, Robin's gone from Batman. And that is a big, and it's fair to say that because they were Batman and Robin. They were 1A, they were 1B on this hockey team. He loses him, but he's still surrounded by great offensive talent. The power play will be fine. A lot of things will be fine. What does Austin Matthews need to do to adjust to this deeper, grittier roster?
He's going to have to be stronger. He's going to have to be healthier. And he's going to have to play without Mitchell Marner, his security blanket on his right side. Whether it's going to be Willie Nylander, whether it's going to be Matthias Michelli, whether it's going to be somebody else, we don't know. But I do know this. Matthew Nyes is going to be on his left side, and he's going to be on his left side for a long time. This team's got a lot going on for it in a positive way. And I think if there's any player in the league, because of his athleticism and skill, that can adjust to not having Mitchell Marner, it's going to be Austin Matthews. I truly believe that. And did we see the best of Austin Matthews last year? No, it was probably a very pedestrian year for him, and you said it great, because of injury. But guess what? And I mean this sincerely. His season was probably better than most people's best season ever.
We talked about this all year long. The argument could have been made, injuries aside, that the way he was playing hockey last year is the best version for the Toronto Maple Leafs team. He does not get enough credit for how good he is defensively, how good he is in the neutral zone, and how he thinks the game. It's all hands and sticks and shots on the surface with him, but he's got a much deeper game, and I think we're going to see it now. We have to see it now if they're going to move further in the playoffs.
I want to vouch for you on that too, Cal, because I remember when I was working at NBC, and Donnie Granada was running USA Hockey at the time, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, I see on the schedule you're coming to do a Detroit-Chicago game." I said, I am. When are you coming into Detroit? I said, I'm coming in 2 days earlier because it was near the start of the year. He goes, would you mind coming and spending a day with my staff and I at USA Hockey and breaking down tape? I said, no, it'd be my honor, be my pleasure. So I landed in Detroit, went out to USA Hockey and spent most of the day with the coaching staff breaking down tape. And there was this one young kid, 16 years old, and he kept popping up on the tape. And I said, who is that guy? And they said, it's Austin Matthews. And I said, well, I've heard of him. I've never really seen him play live. And they go, do you have a comparable? I said, yep, I do, because I coached the guy. He's Ronnie Francis with far more speed and a better ability to shoot the puck. Ronnie Francis is a Hall of Fame player. He's one of the best centermen. He's got to be in the top 10 all-time of centermen that have played in the NHL, Ronnie Francis. Austin Matthews is that player with more speed. He really is. So when I say that with the ultimate praise for Ronnie, because he was such a pleasure to coach and be around, and we won a lot together. But Austin Matthews is truly that good. And I don't think people realize, you said it best, how good he was defensively last year.
Yeah, he was never a liability unless he was injured and on either end of the ice. And I feel like people need to get out of the idea that he needs to score 60 or 70 goals to leave his maximum impact on this team. If he does that, great. But the odds of that coming at the expense of something else on the ice may be a little too high for him to not embrace this new role. Yeah,
no, I think that's fair too. The guy that we're not talking about enough, and we need to now, I think, more than anybody else, is Willie Nylander.
Yeah.
Is Willie going to go 45-plus goals this year? Is Willie going to go 50-plus? I mean, these are real. If he does that, if let's just say Michelli gets 55 points, and let's say Willie Nylander goes 50-plus goals, 45 to 50, all of a sudden we've knocked out the Marner thing.
Yeah.
Not us.
Yeah, it's gone instantly.
Gone.
But like
Pierce.
We've discussed the idea that this roster is very situated to replace Marner's points by committee. They will get redistributed. We'll have a better year out of Nyes. We'll see, like the new guys coming in will score and stuff. It's just there should be less concern as far as I'm concerned that he's gone, and it's not a knock again on him. It's just the fit had expired. It's no more difficult than that.
No, that's fair. Do you remember when Brian Burke used the term truculence?
Yes.
This legitimately is a truculent roster. When you think about Dakota Joshua, and you think about Scott Lawton, and you think about Lawrence, and you think about Nick Roy, and you think about Bobby McMahon, and you think about Max Domi, and you think about Matthew Nyes, and I haven't even talked about Joshua yet, Dakota Joshua. Like, you start looking at this lineup, there's some serious truculence.
Yeah.
And some nastiness, which is very good. I still think they're short on the back end, even though the addition of Henry Thrun is good. I've known Henry a long time, going back to when he played at St. Mark's School in Southborough, Massachusetts. Very good player, very useful player, great first pass defenseman. But he needs to be better down low in his own zone. I'm just being honest. But he can. I think Mike Van Ryan in Toronto can help him a lot. He's the assistant coach that works with the defense there. They need another elite, and I'm not a good elite puck-moving defenseman. They got enough nasty. They got enough shot blocking. They got enough defense. They need one elite puck mover. They really do on the back end.
I want to go quickly back to, you just brought up Nylander, and the formula now is set. We might see the ceiling on how many goals this guy can score in a season.
Yep.
Can you talk about, as they transition more to, like, they like these players that they can put a decent amount of points on the board, but also finish their hits. And they've got a lot of guys. They have Matthew Nyes leading that parade, and he's going to have more points this year in all likelihood. But the guys they're bringing in do that as well. How does that open up the ice potentially and change the way the other team plays you for a guy like Nylander to find the space to score?
I think it's going to open up a lot because the teams are going to be aware of how physical Toronto is. And I think, again, we talked about the back-to-backs, and we talked about the home schedule and how many home games they have. Toronto to start the year, significant amounts of home games. I would tell you, Kyle, right now, the truth is that this is a team that's going to, I think, change the way people play against Toronto. They're going to have to load up their roster a little bit differently because of the physicality that Toronto is going to bring to some of these games. I get it. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I know people love star power. But let's take a page, as you correctly said to start this segment, out of the Florida Panthers playbook. What have they done the last 3 years? They've just bullied everybody. They've turned every single game into a street fight. Every shift is a street fight. And if you're not prepared to do that, you're not beating them. They, as much as, Edmonton 2 years ago wants to trumpet the fact they were down 3-0 and they made it a 7-game series. They had a 6-game series this year. They got wiped out. They got wiped out in games 5 and 6. It wasn't even close because the bully boys, the tough guys, the skilled guys, the fast guys, the nasty guys from Florida, they pulverized them. They did.
Yeah.
And Toronto saw what happened in Game 5 and 7 of their series. That wasn't very friendly either.
No,
So
it's punching the
I
nose
think
nonstop.
copycat in that way is very positive for Toronto, not negative.
No, and again, we're probably taking a more positive tone than a lot of people that have talked about the Leafs in the offseason, but I just do not see a reason not to. And to kind of wrap this all full circle, a big part of the nucleus of how this team will project forward is the coach, Craig Berube. It was, in my opinion, unfair to judge a tenure or get too far into it after a single season. Yeah. You see the parts that don't work. You have a great GM that they obviously have a very close relationship with building out this roster because they're building it in Berube's image. It's his mold. Let's talk about, he just needed more time to hit his stride with a roster that wasn't his, and it's beginning to be a lot more like a Craig Berube roster, isn't it?
I really like that statement. I think it's really fair. I think it's really positive. It's really, really focused. And also, again, we want to talk about Michael Pezzetta. We haven't even talked about Michael Pezzetta. No. We haven't talked about Travis Boyd. We haven't talked about Luke Hames, who was signed out of Dartmouth as a free agent. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with maybe lesser-known players that are going to eventually contribute to this Leafs team, whether it's this year or down the road. And I think that they've done that. And your point about building it in the vision of Craig Berube is wise, because I think that's more of what they want. That's more of what they need, and that's what they saw they had to have, especially after games 5 and 7 in the Florida series. I think they realized, okay, we're good enough to play with them, but are we really set to beat them? And I think now they have a better opportunity to beat them.
Yeah, and as you alluded to before, too, there was 2 key moments in the NHL playoffs. The second one, of course, was when Edmonton got handled by them as well. Oh, it's not just us. That to me is when the panic should have subsided in Toronto, and the optimism should have opened up to say, we're not as far as we think, or else Florida's so far in front of everyone, let's all just give up. But that's not how it works in the NHL. It works in that you move forward and stuff like that. How big is it for like a Berube to get his guy in Dakota Joshua, because he's like spoken about, like, that just seems like it's such a Berube guy. He comes in, but just like a stamp on the roster, from a stamp on the roster point of view, bringing a guy like that back to your nest. How is that? It's
part of the team building exercise. And it also says that the general manager trusts the coach. The coach is going to feel empowered because he's going to say, look, we went and got the guy that we needed. We think is going to help us a ton. And so he feels like he's got a direct line of communication to upper management. That always works well, too, in terms of the dynamic that you have to go through when you're trying to change the quote-unquote DNA of the organization. Yeah. So everybody's singing from the same songbook. I know Toronto fans don't want to hear this, but I will tell you straight up, that's exactly what's going on in Montreal. Exactly what's going on. I can tell you right now, Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes and Marty St. Louis are all singing from the same songbook. All of them are. And I think you're starting to see the same thing in Toronto, where before I think there could have been divisions, whether it was when Lou Lamoriello was there, Kyle Dubas was there, Brendan Shanahan was there. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, Kyle. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But who was actually buying the groceries, to use a Bill Parcells term? Nobody really knew. Now I think it's these guys at the top of the food chain playing with each other and helping one another when it comes to Bradshaw Living and Craig Berube.
That's wonderfully said, Pierre, because a more focused team can lose 102-point score for certain. If that person was a passenger for a different type of ride, if that person wasn't necessarily connected to the DNA of this team or just could not be a part of it any longer, they have to be replaced. Replacement by committee is the answer. It'll be an interesting season. It'll be an interesting rest of an offseason to see if they can get that puck-moving defenseman, to see if they can get another top 6 forward. But let's see how it goes at the start. Who else in the NHL? Yeah, who else in the NHL right now, to quickly conclude, is making roster moves similarly to build a roster in that mold that Florida's proven so successful?
I think Montreal. Yeah. I really do. You look at what Montreal's doing right now. They're going to be really dangerous. Their young guys are getting better. If they ever got a second-line center, Toronto's got a legit second-line center in John Tavares. They really do. And if they're not happy with Johnny one night because of fatigue, they put Nick Roy. You can bump Nicky Roy up there, and you're not going to lose too much. You'll lose a little offensively. You're not going to lose anything defensively. So Toronto's there. But if Montreal ever adds a legit second-line center, You look at the depth they've got on the wings. You look at the depth they have on defense now, and you look at the organizational depth, and this is huge. The organizational depth they have in goal, starting in the American League and going all the way through their NHL roster, they're deep. They're probably as deep as any team in the league when it comes to organizational depth for goaltending and on defense. So Montreal's doing a lot of what Toronto's doing, to be fair.
Yeah, and we did talk about them quite a bit at the end of last season, how their rebuild and their new roster, they're ahead of schedule on that.
They're 100%.
They had a phenomenal.
They really are, Kyle. You're right on about that.
Okay, Pierre, well, thank you once again for joining us here on the Bet Rivers Network. Toronto Sports Rush is, of course, brought to you by that very same network. Don't forget to like and subscribe and join us every week on Mondays. Pierre McGuire giving the best analysis in the business. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.